Hello students, welcome to our online English lesson. Hope you're okay and ready to study. Let's start the lesson. Don't forget to take your notebooks and a pen or a pencil to take notes. The theme of our today's lesson is reading for pleasure. What do you mean by reading for pleasure? Reading for pleasure is reading for enjoyment rather than academic study. So, what are the benefits of reading for pleasure? Benefits your critical thinking, increases knowledge, reduces stress. In our today's lesson, we will read Daniel Defoe's biography. We will watch a short video about Robinson Crusoe. We will read an extract from Robinson Crusoe. Daniel Defoe. Daniel Defoe was an important English writer born in London, England. As a young man, he traveled a lot around Europe as a merchant and wrote for many magazines and newspapers. His first and best-known novel was Robinson Crusoe, which was published in 1719 when Daniel Defoe was 59 years old. Other novels include Mole and Roxana. They are all about people who are in difficult situations and struggle through life, whether physically, financially, or spiritually. Now, answer to questions. Question number 1. Where and when was Daniel Defoe born? Daniel Defoe was born in 1660 in London. Question number 2. How old was he when his first novel was published? He was 59 when his first novel was published. Question number 3. What was his job? He was a merchant, but he also wrote for many magazines and newspapers. Question number 4. Why is Daniel Defoe called the father of the English novel? Daniel Defoe is called the father of English novel because he wrote one of the first novels in the English language. Students, our next task is a video. You will watch a short video about Robinson Crusoe. Then, be ready to answer my questions.
Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe tells the story of a young Englishman called Robinson Crusoe, who dreams of becoming a sailor and traveling the world. When his father refuses to let him go to sea, he runs away. After several misadventures, he ends up in Brazil and becomes rich. Soon, he decides to take a trip to Africa, but his ship is hit by a storm and he ends up alone on a desert island. With a few supplies from the shipwreck, he builds a house, a boat, and a new life. One day, Crusoe encounters people on the island. He discovers that they are natives from a nearby island with some prisoners. He helps a prisoner escape, who eventually becomes his servant and close friend. He names him Friday after the day of the week they met and teaches him to use his tools and speak English. After many years, a European ship comes to the island. Crusoe and Friday make a deal with the captain of the ship and he takes them back to Europe. After 27 years, he finally returns home to England.
Now, students, answer the questions. Question number 1. Why did Crusoe run away from home? Crusoe wanted to be a sailor, but his father wouldn't let him go to sea, so he ran away from home. Question number 2. Where was Crusoe going when his ship was wrecked, and why? When his ship was wrecked, Crusoe was going to Africa to buy some slaves. Question number 3. Where did he end up? He ended up on a desert island because his ship was hit by a storm. Question number 4. Who is Friday? Friday is a prisoner that Crusoe rescued from natives. He becomes Crusoe's servant and friend. Question number 5. How long did he stay on the island? He stayed on the island for 27 years. Students, if you have 4 or 5 correct answers, great. If you have 3 or 2 correct answers, good job. Our next task is, I'm going to read an extract from adaptation of Robinson Crusoe. Your task is now, please read it and please be ready to answer the questions. What problems do you think Crusoe experienced on the island? Think about weather, food, animals, and loneliness. It felt like I was the only man on this earth and had to learn everything by myself. I had found a cave to live in, made plates and cups from wood, and even started a vegetable garden. But the biggest problem encountered was that I wanted to talk to someone. I did have my dog Paul the parrot with me. That made me feel a little better, but there was still something missing. I still wanted to see another person. I made a small boat, but the sea was too dangerous, so I stayed close to the island. The island was large, and I found many beaches and many different kinds of fruits. I managed to survive, and I was grateful for that. But then, some years later, everything changed in a blink of an eye. One day about noon, as I was going towards my boat, I was exceedingly surprised with the print of a man's naked foot on the shore. I stood like one thunderstruck. I listened, I looked around, but could hear nothing, nor see anything. I went up to higher ground to look farther. I went up the shore and down the shore, but I was all alone. I could see no other impression but that one. I went to it again to see if there were any more, and to observe if it might not be my fancy. But there was no room for that, for there was exactly the print of a foot, toes, heel, and every part of a foot. I stayed there for a long time thinking, but became more and more confused. At last I returned home very frightened. The moon looked down on me as I was walking terrified to the last degree, looking behind me at every 2 or 3 steps. At that moment, every bush and tree, every stump was a man. When I came to my cave, my castle, I fled into it like one pursued. Whether I went over by a ladder, as first contrived, or went in at the hole in the rock, which I called the door, I cannot remember. I ran for cover. I slept none that night. The more I thought about what I had seen, the more afraid I became. While these reflections were rolling in my mind, I was very thankful in my thoughts that I was so happy as not to be thereabouts at the time, or that they didn't see my boat, by which they would have concluded that some inhabitants had the place, and perhaps have searched farther for me. Now, students, let's do an exercise. Decide if the following statements are true or false. Sentence number 1. Robinson Crusoe was completely happy living with his dog and parrot. The answer is false. Robinson Crusoe wanted to talk to someone and see another person. Sentence number 2. Robinson Crusoe was scared by a person. The answer is false. Crusoe was scared by the thought that someone else was on the island. He didn't actually see them, only their footprint. Sentence number 3. Crusoe found only one footprint. The answer is true. Sentence number 4. Crusoe had trouble sleeping that night. The answer is true. Sentence number 5. Crusoe was glad nobody saw his boat. The answer is true. Students, if you have 4 or 5 correct answers, great. If you have 3 or 2 correct answers, fine. So students, I see that you read a lot, and reading plays a very big role in your life. It was a very interesting journey with Robinson Crusoe, and I'm sure you have learned a lot about the writer and the work that made him famous. Students, your home task for the next lesson is to write a short composition, If I Were on a Desert Island, using 10-15 sentences. Thank you for the lesson. Goodbye.